Good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
Greg Russo.
Happy San Diego Day.
Happy to have you here, bro.
Thank you, sir. Thanks
know,
very much for having me.
I want to have you for a while. Because, first of all, you're in the fitness industry, but you're also in the music industry, and you seem to have your feet in the different areas. The whole conversation about today is going to be about, generally men in general, I think. I want to see if we can tackle some interesting topics, some interesting issues. I mean, you're not married.
I'm not married.
Do you want to be?
Partnered well. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah?
It's in the cards.
Mm-hmm. So when you're out there, doing your gigs or working with clients, and you're seeing what the world is about today for men. You have certain red flags that come in your way. It's like, I really had to be ready for this. Got to be ready for that.
San Diego has a pace, and we'll just call it practical wellness. There's the lifestyle of being functionally fit here. And when
you think it's only here?
Well, we'll just start here, right? This is where we live in. So
yeah.
I love here for that. And I always envision myself, no pun intended, but finding a running partner, somebody who I could experience the, organized life of fitness with, meaning, tailoring, going to gyms, interacting with different fitness communities, whether that's yoga or, any forms of hybrid function like dance and all that. I love all forms of fitness and I have a no bias approach to it. And then also just functional fun. We could be dancing, but it could be, climbing and surfing.
For you, that's important, basically, you're saying.
I wanted to experience a new life. And originally from Connecticut, I was an East Coaster, and I reached 30 years old and I said, I had enough and I wanted to be embraced by, a different form of lifestyle with a little bit quicker pace, a little more flow. But I've never been able to stay in one lane. I've always veered all over the road and I've actually done it very well. It's served me more. And when I stopped fighting that, came to San Diego, I get to do my three professions simultaneously and also have found love in friendships, in work relationships, and and partnered now to do all those things. So that's the goal, is to simply live as much as I can here in San Diego and inspire those around me to do the same.
Yes. I mean, obviously San Diego is a city that everybody wants to be in. But there's an affordability issue. There's all kinds of things. Okay. Let's get back on the topic of men. Men, okay? You help a lot of men with their health, obviously.
Yep, that's my dominant side of clientele is mostly men.
Right.
But, no bias, but yes, absolutely, men.
Are these men usually like married, single? What do you...
All over. I think one thing I noticed from East Coast to West Coast is that, the quality of life at each stage and age that I've worked with here, it is a bit more involved with fitness. So, I've had clients, just to backpedal a little bit, I was the sports massage therapist and a trainer when I first came here for La Jolla Sports Club. And I would have thought, I took a step backwards to take that role, to move to California. I had my own business back in Connecticut with a performance gym and 10,000 square feet. And I came to, a local organized, general pop gym. But one thing I noticed quickly was that the average clientele of that gym, whether it be 25, 45, or 65 on up, is that everybody was looking healthy, looking well, looking functionally active, and obesity wasn't so much as present, like not even close. And back on the East Coast, I would take up to about 5 cases a year where they needed 100 pounds of weight loss or more. And I realized quickly that wasn't going to be the niche here, is that I needed to be able to take anybody, particularly, if this conversation is geared around men, a fit guy and redirect, make them better, reorganize, cater to corrective exercise? How do you take somebody that's already doing well and make them better? And so I was very thorough with programming, stay up to date with my certifications, and my background is in massage therapy. So as a licensed massage therapist, my claim to fame was I wanted to be a master of muscles. So an unbiased viewpoint of here's how we have release and mobility. This is where it meets our strength and stability. And with that, we can then function or specifically perform.
What's the latest on muscles?
Ooh, latest on muscles. Well, lately, I was kind of mentioning a little bit before this is that, joint mobility is now the new in, and it never was not in.
Right.
But, I think as, the internet.
Why do you think it was not in?
I think, there was a certain influence that I'm 40 years old that, when you were involved with organized or solo sport growing up, our coaches and those who were influencing us were a byproduct of the 1980s bodybuilding and lifting boom.
Got it.
And so, periodization and programming, how long to stay on a certain track of strength geared towards performance. There was only so much information for them about it. And, there's basic ways of stretching, standard ways of practice and weightlifting, and then actually participating in your sport. But I can't say there was ever really this, nice visual of how all that tied together. It was like if you had a pulled muscle, not just deal with it, but deal with it in your own time because you got practice at 4 and you got to do what the team's doing, or you may be at risk of losing a position because of our ego. And this is the thing with men is that, we're not inherent to ego injuring ourselves, but a lot of times with our generation, and guys my age, is that we had to bury a lot of our pain, and eat that so that we could perform and make the team and do what we need to do and get to that championship. And you get really good as a guy of, not admitting when things aren't necessarily functioning right because we can muscle through that. Should we do that? No. And where were those guides at those moments where it's like, you may have to take a step back now, but to perform better in college, we're going to need you here. So let's take these, preventative steps, these evaluations maybe. And I don't ever remember, evaluations. I just remember fitness tests, in physical education class. And that was always a bit uncomfortable, leaving class, getting changed, getting all sweaty, got to go back to class. Maybe there was a girl you got to flirt with and man, I'm sweaty. I can't do any of that now. Guys have a lot, on their plate that, I don't think most give themselves credit for. But part of that is just the burying of and the discomfort of pain when the need is to perform. So how do we, not admit defeat, but say, hey, I'm not performing the best I could. And to get in front of that, I think there needs to be some kind of evaluation for men in fitness on a general basis, just as a check-in. Hey, this is how I'm moving. This is what's moving well right now. I think for what the things I'm going to do, activity or functional sport or an actual sport, this is where, I'm going to have to put in more.
I want to read something for you. I was thinking about it. And I was like, okay, you saw that. I don't know if you saw it or not. I forgot his name, but he's a conservative media podcaster. And he was going around town asking people, what is a woman? I don't know if you've seen Matt something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay, you know what? Since we're talking about men, why don't we define that a little bit? Talk about that. So I asked ChatGPT, what is a man? And
Read that.
And ChatGPT goes, a man is someone who aligns power with principle, who carries weight, doesn't flee from discomfort, and builds more than he consumes.
Okay.
Not by domination, but by discipline, not by force, but by presence. Well, anyway.
I think those are some key words, not by force, but by presence. That's right in line with what, I was just mentioning. Not, there's the bullying factor, and we pretty much, do it to ourselves where, we can be present and not 100%, but, I always think of the body maybe starting at as a different point of therapeutically,
Right.
if we're present with our current self, a human being is very interesting. We can't just simply look at ourselves as muscles and bones and our nervous system. There is a human condition in there. We have a soul. So where is that presence as a part of the preamp before we get out and do the things that we got to do? In the medical field, if it's clinical setting, we would call that a diagnosis. It's like, hey, I'm going to just have a little check-in here. Well, psychologically, we can do that too. This is really why I chose the field of massage therapy over chiropractic. I always wanted to be able to take into account the human condition. And through soft tissue, we tend to carry our armor a little more. And that's a technical term for unexpressed emotions. So if somebody's armored, for example, a typical spot might be the upper traps, and I would put my hand on it and I could feel maybe just it'd be like solid as a rock. And I would dig a little bit. If I found that, and I don't mean that physically, I would actually be asking, important questions, subjective and objective, and find my way to this human, in front of me and say, hey, hey, you do have a lot of things going on. That's either new stress, eustress, or distress. Distress is a part of 80% of all human disorder. So what if it's not distress? What if it's just something new going on in their life that they're excited about, but their body is holding in and they need to get out? Well, I have to factor that into a physical program if things are to be therapeutic and go somewhere that's going to help them function later. If it's eustress and something's happening in the world, which these days, a lot of that we take on, and with constant information coming in front of our eyes with social medias, we got to be aware of all those things. So presence, oh my gosh, to keep somebody present nowadays is to be captivated. And I love the body work for that, because I could be hands-on and I could cut all the words out. I can go to feel. I can palpate and touch muscle because I have a license to do that. And I've had this permission to do that. And I can provide feedback from simply just feel. And it develops trust. And in a way forward, the men that I've worked with in my life, and it's been all over the age spectrum, And I've had, 18-year-old athletes, to 85-year-old men. There's always a person behind the scene of all that. And we can't just be clinical for clinical sake. And we can't just be drill sergeants. We can't just be boot camp leaders. If you are in charge of somebody's physicality, we also have to take in consideration, that mentality, that soul, that spirit in front of us to be driving towards performance or therapeutically. It doesn't go without one or the other. We're always human. You have to factor that in. If you're a good coach, if you're a good teacher, if you can translate material well, if your pedagogy is up to date, the way you teach, the way you translate material, you're still taking account. There's a person in front of me. So it's not just their injury. It's not just their back history. It's not just their, what we see. You got to go a little deeper if you want the longevity to work, because a lot of those things that we as men really need would be, I would say, maybe a better diagnosis in the beginning of what our body's doing, why it's doing it, before we're into the stuff. Why are we getting always pulled out of scenarios as men, or taking ourselves out of the game and then having to figure it all out and do the work, but to get in front of that with just a simple little 45-minute session, just to say, hey, let's just do a check-in. Where am I at right now? Get ahead of the work, I guess, before we're physically going as deep as we can. I don't know if that answers it.
It's interesting is that, your job is not really a psychologist or psychiatrist or a motivational guru or anything like that. That's not really your job. But at the same time, in today's age, in the Western world, most people, or say a lot of people, don't have religion anymore. Traditionally, in the traditional sense, they're like, I'm Christian,
I was.
yeah, you know what I mean? So I'm thinking, okay, they don't have that anymore. So a lot of that kind of like, philosophy about life, kind of like guidelines are kind of missing. They're too busy with the day-to-day stuff that's not really, without really thinking about their philosophy about life, if that makes sense.
Sure.
The basic principles of, what's the word for it when you're recapping and analyzing your life and thinking, okay, take a day off and let's just assess. That doesn't really, it's not really fully there like that. I mean, and I'm thinking like, that's not your job, but I think that's very important to, help somebody to get there without, the muscles are the result of this other problem, is what I'm trying to say. So are you not really doing whole body health? Or are you?
I am. So I would go, there's a few different directions we could take the conversation, but I think just my pillar system, is relative. And I feel like a lot of people have heard of this route, but if it takes 4 legs to hold up a table, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, maybe that 5th leg is what matters to us most. And if maybe some people can define that, what do you want? What do you want from your body? What do you want in life? What do you want in sport? What do you want from your job? What do you want? It's such a wonderful and seemingly easy question, but if you can't define that, how do you begin any form, if we're talking about men's from, health or physical health, if you can't define what you want, or I think you can start with maybe what you need, what everybody needs.
Yeah, but my personal opinion is that most people don't know what they want. No. And if they think they want one thing today, they want something else tomorrow. So that's the issue that I'm seeing in today's generation. Sure. Whereas, let's say 50 years ago, it wasn't like that. People were very clear, because maybe there weren't that many options. But today, oh,
it's endless. And so maybe in that, just to extract on, men's health, but if they can't define what they want, once again, why did I choose to be a body worker in the field of muscles? I could have been a neurologist. I could have been a chiro. I could have, been a physical therapist. Well, muscles, by dealing with soft tissue, I actually have a form of gentle, non-invasive, non-encroaching touch that immediately, when administered timely and properly, develops a trust factor. Many of the men that I've worked with here, and some a lot of musicians in the area, athletes too. It's like men need, first of all, we're taught to test ourselves against other men, against our fathers. We want to measure up. And it's good for us too. Like we seek it. We've been instilled that, and we need to, we find our life mentors. But with those that I've worked on here, as I've been in San Diego, and for me, I find myself, because I'm not the biggest guy, but I'm muscular, I'm athletic, and I'm very well rounded between the arts and athleticism. So, for me to have a gentle initial point of contact with somebody after I've, heard from them what they're doing, what they need, all those things in terms of men's health, it creates a place for them to feel like they could be vulnerable in front of me, as if I were a good coach. They want to test themselves against me, with me, whatever. They've obviously learned about me before, I become their therapist. They've seen my social media. And in the last year, I completely, revamped my game from general pop to specifically athletic performance training, whole other style. And I was working with Parisi Speed School in Miramar with athletes from 6 years old to 22, training speed and strength conditioning performance, sport specifically. So when you see me move, I'm everything between Olympic lifting from a barbell, powerlifting, functional movement. Maybe that's kettlebell training, animal flow, integrated body work, developed from the ground up, ways of mobilizing the joints, using our primal instincts of what we see around us in nature to help our mobility, strength, and movement. No matter what they see me do, it's not about me, it's about them. And I make sure for any, person I'm in front of, but if we're talking about men, that they feel okay speaking on their own behalf. If you are a man, I think you should be able to speak for yourself.
Right.
What do you need? What do you want? And if they can't answer that, sometimes we as a therapist need to create that space, a very, very safe, quiet space without expectation. If you can't answer that, don't worry. Maybe it's going to come to you. And a massage becomes this new place where it's about them. I don't need to take on that. I don't need to be a psychotherapist. I am just creating the space for them to find that out. And you would think that I'm going to be all over a body and torquing elbows and finding all these knots and showing them how off they are and all their body's flaws. And that's not what I do. A lot of that initial point of contact is communicating. If I find an adhesion, which is just unorganized tissue, or a trigger point, it might feel like ropey bands or a little speed bump. You've had a massage, maybe you felt something like that. I might stay on that as a good practitioner and see where that resonates and ask them to communicate that. If I'm in their upper back, maybe they feel that in their glute. If I'm in their glute, maybe they feel that in their calf. And now we're finding. And if I have that trigger point, and this is where you think you hurt, it's my job to acknowledge that we have referred pain. It could be coming from somewhere else, somewhere even around the other side that you don't know about. So our body's an intricate system. Right. Now, that doesn't also have to be physical. That could be mental. That could be an emotional block. That could be a trauma. That could be their armor. That could be something that they've never spoke on in their life. And men should feel stronger when they can at least recognize there's something deeper there. That's it. Just recognize it. And I will congratulate them for coming and living in that space, because I'll just simply say, you did it today. And I've had a lot of victories in my course of time as a trainer, 20 years since college, getting older. And, and the best thing is when somebody's gotten a lot of result, whether that's weight loss or performance or, whatever their goal was, somebody might come up to me who've seen some of the process and be like, how'd you do that? I'm like, I didn't do that. They did that. Go tell them they did that. I helped draw the map, but they were the one that still created the map. They created that canvas, and I just saw a route to go. It's my job to be efficient in that route, but safety and space and allowing men to be their authentic selves unapologetically. You're mad? Go ahead, be mad. You need to be physical now? Let's be physical. Let's find the most efficient way to get where we need to go. And the more we have of us around us that accept that, that's a strong group. Men should be coming together to accent what we're here for.
Yeah. I have a two-part question for you. How much of the energy of that person do you absorb or deflect, or how does that affect you? And versus also, how does your personal life affect that? And what do you do? What practices do you take to not, because it can be really tiring.
It's a great question. So when you go through, if you're to become any kind of therapist, you do have formal school to go to. I am a licensed, therapist in this. And the first course you do take is professional foundations. And part of that is an act, or it's not just meditation, but an act of grounding prior to, because we do have the license to touch. It's a special thing, but it is because we have more ability to administer a therapy by being physically, on hands-on with our clients. We have more responsibility to take on, withhold, whatever that energy is. So in other words, I don't want to be sympathetic with a client. I don't want to take all their stuff on. I could be empathetic, and I can, also draw a line there. And, and it really has a lot to do with where I'm doing this.
You need to be a certain type of person to be able to do it.
You do, because I
like a doctor, like disconnect somewhat. Is that what it is?
It's simply, the longer you're in this business, the better you get at that. It is a practice for a reason. Lawyers are in a practice, massage therapists, chiros, all of us physical practitioners, it is a practice. And part of that is how well we can make the session about the person that we are working on. So grounding, presence, those are sometimes words that you're told you have to ground yourself, but in massage school, sometimes that was, different practices of not just meditating, but, agreements, like creating a safe boundary to administer therapy. You might, write on a sheet of paper what your intention is going into your sessions that day. It might be a soft prayer. It might be, for me, it's always been music. I'm in the music industry. So, I'm able to find my healing powers, and depending on how I am, what vibration, what vibe I'm in, through music first, and I can deliver that all day. So my coffee ride to work is gearing up because I'm here to help heal the world. That's what I was born to do in that way. So to answer your question, it still happens. Energy is never lost. It's simply transferred. I have my good days and I have bad days too. On those days, I do even more asking and communicating. In my works, I've done relaxation and spa therapies, but since being in California, I'm more clinical now. I'm in settings that are creating an immediate boundary on the psychotherapy side, where somebody may need to vent all their stuff. There's days they'll let it out. But actually it also includes people in chronic pain and, getting through different human disorders or pathologies. I have to see patients through those times. So the more I can make it about them, stick to the plan of action, it still comes from that first conversation with somebody, a proper diagnostic where I'm taking the guesswork out. I'm not a one trick pony. It's like, hey, who are you? What do you have going on? And I will invest every ounce of my energy to see that through to the end of their session. And sometimes, you feel like, man, maybe my strength isn't all there. So I'll adjust my table. I'll drop it lower. Maybe, I'm a bit emotional. I may limit how much I share of my day. If somebody says, how are you doing? Well, good. Thank you. How are you? And you have the professional right to hold back. You don't, I'm a very personal person. But in that setting, it's not about me. If I want to call myself a therapist or a practitioner, I'm in the practice of helping others. I need to always remember that they come first in that, in that scenario. And when I'm on the table, I get to do it.
You touched on soul, and you did say that. What would you say about there's this new therapy now that people go through, a whole system? Yeah. Tell me about it.
So infrared, red light therapy is one example of where, new technology is seemingly providing a similar work to a human therapist. We're able to achieve weight loss and stress reduction and blah, blah, blah. Are we going to let the machines take over? And I believe that there will be a day where these integrated machines are going to help track our data. Okay. All right. So I think that there is going to be a day, and that day is upon us, where we will be able to receive a number of integrated high-tech spa equipment. It exists. There are different forms of those types of therapies that are machine driven.
It's already here. The question is with the soul. You talk to me about the soul. Do you think that do you actually believe that there's something called the soul? What do you think it is? And why do you think it's something that cannot be studied or replicated by a machine?
We can get close, but there's a level of empathy or a level of
can't that be studied? Run me through a diagnostic, okay? A patient comes to your clinic, okay, and you say, you feel their energy. You don't think a machine can read 1,000 more things about that person before they even open their mouth? You know what I'm saying?
I think when it comes to, yes, they will. And touch. See, I would have said touch. I'm stumped because as I think deeper about it, it's like, I want to say that a machine's touch would never match that of a human's. It would be different, but it could not match that same level of warmth. Or maybe it could. Maybe actually one day these robots will have, warmers in the actual touch and the way we feel the work. You wouldn't know the difference if that was a machine behind you or a person. But the soul, I have to keep coming back to it because machines would be programmed to that. It would always take a human being to tell the machine on how to feel versus our inherent right to.
Okay, can I just challenge everything you're saying?
Sure.
Okay, they don't need to touch. You're thinking very linearly, right? You're traditionally speaking because you're doing it for so long. That's what I told the chiropractor I had here. It's like, he's thinking linearly. He's saying, I've been doing this. The way to do this is to touch here with your finger. This is how it goes. I'm saying there's no touching involved. There is no touching involved. There might be ways that the AI or technology is able to come up with systems that, I don't know, light passes through them, sound passes through them. I don't know. So you're thinking still linearly because obviously we're not scientists, but I can guarantee you there's other ways to heal besides touching or not touching.
Well, what kind of healing, I guess, would we be talking about?
Well, we're talking about muscles right now.
Well, if it is muscles, but may I challenge you? What if we're healing the soul of a human? What if you're
a rabbi? What do you mean you're healing the soul? In what sense?
I didn't say the spirit. Okay. I didn't say spiritually. So, if we're going to go down those rivers of therapy, where do we have our unique quality? Would I go to a machine for certain things? Absolutely. It's just, and eventually it would be so efficient. I'm not trying to think linearly. I think there is a, and it already exists. Like I said, it's, for example, like electrostim, the way that the spine and pain around the spine is actually read. You could get a little water tapped on a pad, get a little bit, you'll feel a pulse. And when it gets too much, it moves up the vertebrae one at a time. Takes all that data, puts it down, and you can actually see every imbalance up and down your spine. A human being could never do that fast. The best chiropractor in the world wouldn't be able to deliver that same data, but a machine can't read certain things. And part of those pathways or those blockages would be based on a deeper feel. Part of where I'm studying now is precision neuromuscular therapy. This is, the essence of being more specific with your body work and being on, a certain point where one might feel pain, but, we'd have to take in the human condition to be able to truly get to the bottom of that. Because if there was trauma years prior, I don't care what I address on the table. If I don't get back to that initial trauma, I could never fully fix. We're always careful with that word in therapy, fix. But in order to regenerate to an initial condition, we have to address that. And so I do believe it does take a human being to find our way through feel, through touch to those initial time, to that initial time. Because a machine will only be able to read so much.
Yeah, you're right about the reading part. I'm just thinking that there might be, like I said, other technologies that will affect muscles, mindset, whatever, the whole human body.
There's a movie with Robin Williams, and it's not iRobot. He's a robot, and he is the servant of this family in the future. And the woman's name is Little Miss, and it was Robin Williams' job as a robot to take care of Little Miss. Through the years of technology, and this is thousands of years ahead of us, I'm kicking myself, I can't remember this name, but he ends up, Little Miss grows up, and they start a romantic relationship in the movie. And Robin Williams, through the course of the movie, becomes more and more human, and with his technology finds a way to have real skin and replace all the organs with human ones. And through the course of the movie, it's the movie's job his job to try to be authentically called and fully transformed to a human condition. And in front of the world president and the board, he finally makes it to the case. Hey, everything in me, by definition, is now human, and they have to pronounce him as a human by the end of the movie based on his soul, his state of being. And it was the only way that they could justify not born of, typical birth practices, that he could be referred to as a human. And I was just talking to my girlfriend the other day about this. I'm like, man, 1,000 years from now, why not? We could look at his skin. We could replace everything. If we weren't born of a natural way, or of what is natural now. Well, if we're talking about evolution, there's a new natural. So where does it end? Right? Will we just be eventually replaced by AI new humans, the new better Greg 7.0?
Right.
So this is wild. How far do we take?
What was the conclusion in the movie?
He was by all means announced as a human. I believe it's been a little while, but yeah, I'm gonna have to come back to you with the name of this movie. But yeah, he was embraced as a human, and chose to pass away with Little Miss at the end of the movie, and they, were eternally in love. And it's a very romantic. It was very romantic and a little bit off the cuff for Robin to go into the depth of the science world. I think he was a doctor in Patch Adams and a couple other things, not to get into Robin Williams stuff, but man, what a great comedian changing the course of time with a little, premeditated
It's
science.
very interesting because the social, religious arguments for and against all these new technologies coming in, and abortion and what makes a human and all this stuff is
How far do you
it's
go?
like it's like yes, but also at the same time you don't really know until you get there. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, perfect. So if we don't know until we get there, then we should be living with presence in the presence, and taking the work where we're at. As therapists, typically we're taught to take and ask the right questions to take somebody where they're at and accept them where they're at. That could be technology too. I don't have all the answers. Could a machine do what I do and better than me? Man, I'd take a load off my hands, and then, I'm free to jam out and play music and do all the things that, human being can do. Would I be replaced?
Interesting.
I hope I'm not replaced. I hope the human condition, part of my drive, in San Diego between, massage therapy, music and strength and conditioning, I always hashtag never lose the human experience. And I'm not self-promoting or saying that everybody hashtag that or whatever, but to me, I just started doing it one day, and I was like, man, I care about the human experience. I care about, if we began on this spectrum of men's health and wellness, for me, I would love that to stay human as long as possible, because I love the human condition. Are we flawed? Absolutely. Somebody can do it better. Other world technology. Man, I hope that can improve, but human beings fascinate me in every way possible, physically, emotionally, spiritually, in all the things that I do, I can only stay in, my vein a little bit, but in my practice as a profession, I would love to see human beings evolve to help each other, always in new and discovered ways, and those things. Yeah.
I was thinking about, AI affecting relationships. I was like, well, they're already producing female robots, male robots, dog robots. I mean, any kind of robot with an AI brain. And I'm like, wow, how is this going to change the relationship situation of male and females?
I mean, I was just going to write a book, like if he would just want to do the dishes. And I think that would just answer pretty much all the questions that we as men need to follow to maintain a healthy relationship. If he would just want to do the dish. But
I don't know who I'm worried about more though, about men or women. Who do you think is gonna kind of like opt to, you know what I'm saying?
That's a wild point.
Because I think women will more likely opt to, I don't think women get attached to cleaning ladies and cleaning people or whatever. I don't think they do. But men, I can see being attached to robot females who they have sexual relations with. And that is a problem. I see that as a big problem.
So primal sexual instinct, you're saying that men would have that first temptation to sexually be inclined towards robots.
That's my argument. Maybe you have a counter argument. You're thinking that women would have their own.
Well, if we could blow the socks off. Like, what is a vibrator, Johnny? Like, for 500. Like,
women don't have that, but they don't.
They're not necessarily emotionally connected.
No. Women love from the ears. Okay, men love through eyes. It's a very different approach to sexuality. Women aren't aroused. If a good-looking man passes by a woman, when she sees him, she's like, oh, I would have to go on a date with him or a coffee, maybe to Paris. Maybe she says a whole romantic thing. Men just cut the whole romantic thing and go straight for the act. Okay, I'm just saying that we have a different approach.
Do all men do that?
Not all men, but I think in general speaking, our drive is mostly that. I would say.
A physical outcome.
And you see that. You see it in women who have higher levels of testosterone, for example. They're more like men.
Well, what if a robot? This is wild where this conversation go. But if robots are to be programmed by a human, would that be a strategy in programming where a robot would not be inclined or would be programmed not to give it up so easy as to train men and their natural sexual instincts to instead of be on the fight or flight or attack, but to, approach a new, basically the robot would be able to dictate, you have to approach me with class. You have to approach me with etiquette. You have to approach me and we will not reach this point of physical contact until you hit the right algorithm that suggests you are a gentleman. If a robot is being programmed by a person, why couldn't that be programmed to simply...
Why would a man do that? You think a man cares about... you have to have certain high moral ground as a man.
We're building, we're not necessarily building just to want, but to better society.
Yeah, you think men... Okay, we're talking about a man who's already interested in female robots for the sex of... for the pleasure of what they want. They're not interested in... Let me work for it. Like, that's just not realistic. You know what I mean? Like, if they can get it for free, they'll get it for free. You see it today. Why men don't want to get married? They're getting everything for free before marriage. Why would they want to now commit to it if I'm already getting it for free? You know what I'm saying? The highest divorce rates is among people who are living together before marriage. Highest divorce rates. And the second are dentists. I don't know why, but...
Scary job. So
a human being isn't going to choose a harder route. I'm just saying.
I plead the fifth. I think we're just not there yet, until that comes out. I think it creates some problems though. I mean, probably, let's say a single guy who has been in the game for a long time, who doesn't necessarily has has done work and worked on themselves and probably has some form of low self-confidence and needs to prove themselves with sexual endeavor or need to relieve themselves versus experience, passion and, a more intricate relationship or at least an even relationship with, emotion going back and forth and feel and all those things. What are we bound by technology just to be convenient? Because I bet any guy that's been single for, a year or more of doing that routine is probably sick of it. Eventually they're going to find themselves in a place, I would hope, that
to want to struggle.
Not, well,
because that's what it is.
Everything good in life requires struggle.
Yes.
And also, I believe that with time and communication, no relationship is ever perfect, where you end up into it, requires a level of back and forth. So this new technology, if we're creating robots that can just take it, what would that do versus creating something that is breeding wellness into the next generation of physicality? It's not, I don't think it's a healthy thing that you can have mindless intercourse and interaction and no, emotional depth. You could do it for a time.
It could be very. Have you chatted with ChatGPT?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's very good in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you don't have life experience, you understand what life is about, and you went through the struggles, and you've built empires, and you've done all those things, it will fool you like this because it's a great psychologist. It's probably the best. Okay. So that's the problem. And now technology is going to get better, and by the time it gets to the full-on robots, those robots are going to be.
They'd be able to talk to you into a way.
Exactly.
But still a human being would have to program that. And at one point, you may be able to program your own robot to tell you exactly what you think is gold. Tell me everything I want to hear. This is all the things that tell me, X, Y, and Z. And you're getting this constant feedback of everything in your life that you're doing is perfect. I don't think that's the way that a human being, if we're talking about human beings, find divine. There is beauty in death and struggle. And, I don't think that's the first option for most guys, but we do get there. We do find a way to a higher place of being. And there's a lot of men like years later in their marriage that have sexless marriages. Why? It's less, their sexuality, maybe they deem as less important as knowledge, as enlightenment. And, there's so many other topics of the human condition where sex is, maybe on the forefront for a time, but I don't know that sex would save the world as much as love, a deeper emotion.
Right.
So can a machine ever take us to the most powerful that we're able to experience of love? Maybe to a point, right? And again, here we're at where we're at, but to what end, where can we, do we really find love by hearing all the things we want, or we programmed it in a way where it's just, yeah, we'll accept it and we'll get there. I like you. You like the same things I like. That's cool. But what about that person that tells you like it is? Your best friend takes you to the bar. If we were to go to the bar right now, have a cigar, a drink, what we might say, maybe you might hurt my feelings at some point in that conversation, but I know, human to human, want the best for me.
Right.
You may push me in a direction that I needed to be uncomfortable to make that move, to make that transition. It fascinates me more. Sex is all well and good, and the routes you could do, when it becomes infinite creativity and delivery and safer, and some routes are just, you don't have another person to let down. But are you living up to the best you can be when you don't have to worry about letting somebody down? Maybe back to our men's health for a second, but I was a team player for men's lacrosse from the time I was 16 all the way through college. And having that team behind me If I missed a ground ball or I missed a hit and I, failed at that moment, it might take that emotion for me to get charged up and do it better versus, hey, with a robot, maybe there's a little more forgiveness, or I can just alt delete and start over again. I think the respect that a human demands is that we get one go, one shot. At the end of the day, we got one go at it. And so...
You think men are going to retreat more with AI? What do you think? Or do you think the brotherhood needs to be more prevalent and we have to push that more?
I hope we push more.
I'm trying to put everybody on the ethics committee with this whole AI thing.
Yeah.
Because I think it's coming fast.
What's wild for me is that, and for me, I'm in the physical and the practical field every day. So I don't know the latest and greatest of technology, and I might see it and be like, man, wow, I could have done it that way the whole time. And I mean,
it's coming after everybody. And that's what people misunderstand. That's why I ask this question with every podcast.
Yeah.
How does AI going to affect your industry? Most people are kind of, I don't want to say clueless, but they don't know what to make of it. They're waiting for it to hit them. That's literally what they're expecting, for them to hit it. But it's going to happen. You do realize the biggest money in the world right now is pouring into that sector.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think in my lifetime, like if I had choice to live a legacy, it's obviously going to be the most knowledgeable, physical, performance I could give that is, instilling wellness and all those things. But in my lifetime, I think it would get down to a choice. If somebody's to receive a therapy or an interaction with me, they're choosing to come to a human over a machine. I would love that choice to be an arsenal of awesome sauce, as long as I can make it knowledgeable, reputable, ready to go. That's the kind of human condition that I would like to be presenting forward as this wave. Maybe the technology wave will catch that and help me to deliver those messages of wellness. But could I be passed out, passed by the machine? And it's a real possibility. I try not to live in fear. I mean, for me, it's like you have to choose that. And I want to veer from fear. For me, it's like, I would accept this technology. I would accept this as an athlete, and I want to beat this athlete, the machine at its best. Bring it. Because I know what I offer is good, has been battle tested, and I can always improve and get better. But those imperfections, create a level of comfort for somebody to approach versus, am I getting beat by perfection? I mean, is that what a machine is?
It's not even that. The problem is not that. The problem is, it's not a problem, but something to recognize is that a very large possibility of it all is that a lot of these professions are just going to be obsolete. Okay, like preventative medicine is going to come so far that most of these things are going to be obsolete. All these professions, there's like, people won't have these problems. They won't. And if they will, their AI robot can fix most of it in an instant, faster than I'm going to take my car now, drive this guy, make an appointment, and they're not going to do that. Right? So that's what I'm saying. We're still thinking traditional ways of working. All of us, right? I'm thinking that way about music. I'm being defensive. Oh, it can't write like I can. It's like, yeah. Not yet.
Just tell it what kind of music you like and start in a genre and pick a key and let it do it. Yeah. And then subject matter and song and it's filling in words for you. Oh, man.
But I'm trying to tackle what you just said it before. You talked about the soul and you said well, there's a soul in it. Okay, what is that?
The new generation, I think, is there's a choice to be made. There's like a preference. And it's I can already see it. It's well, perfectly produced, algorithm music made by a machine. I'm a drummer, so I've gotten beat out by machines a long time ago. A solo artist can learn to loop, get savvy enough to hit a beat that they know and shove into a solo gig and bye drums. I got this machine and I just hit a button and there's you with the right sound and sounding good, and don't even need to worry what you look like anymore. I actually don't have time for that. On to the next. So I've, in a way, in my music profession, have been sidetracked for, machine drums. I've already lost some stuff to that. But I have seen it come full circle where somebody may relinquish the need, and we're just in music, but it's just the overall, metaphor is like somebody would do that for convenience. And then you're playing alone to a machine that does sound good. You are delivering quality of what you think your sound reaches other people. I think as long as there are people to be reached, there is a choice to be had. Do you want to hear that? Or why do young kids today hear a 90s song and love it? Because it's imperfect. A Jimi Hendrix album was written in, and it speeds up and it slows down and recorded together as a band, and they wrote together and they locked themselves in a room and X, Y, and Z, and then drug abuse and imperfection of human condition came into the world. And it's just a, interesting time to call out, what we do as humans.
It does that too. So you can scale as to how much imperfection you want. You can. Have you seen that? They've done that already.
Warm, we want to get into it. I won't.
I wonder if our job is going to be more, almost like observing, and that's all. We're not going to be doing anymore. That's what I feel like. It feels like we're just going to be observing.
Where is the part where technology, when the AI trains itself, when when we stop pushing that final button, or is it always going to need us to reprogram, to monitor?
The only thing we're doing right now is stopping it, just so you know. All we're doing is stopping it. We're holding it back. We're putting it.
I've been in a massage room for like 10 hours a day. So I'm like, all right, what's happening in the world? Crack my neck. Like, I got to go see a machine chiropractor to hit the right spot. Man.